Welcome to HeartWired, the podcast where emotionally intelligent leadership in an AI world, where the technology meets humanity. So I have with me today a very special person, and I've known Laurel for just a long, long time in different capacities. And I'm just so thrilled to have you here today, Laurel. You're the Executive Vice President and Chief Risk Officer for American Riviera Bank. And you hold a certification in regulatory compliance. And you have so much experience, and you've implemented enterprise-wide risk management, compliance, fraud, anti-money laundering, vendor management, business continuity, and mostly for banks. And it's just amazing. So thank you so much for agreeing to be one of my guests.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Well, Laura, let's start. And you have over 30 years navigating all that kind of regulatory change in banking. And you've had a lot of mergers and acquisitions that I've also been part of.
Yes.
And also into play, had implementation of risk management frameworks. And now we're looking at AI that's reshaping how our financial institutes operate. So we're going to dive right in. So you're right there. You're right in the middle of that innovation and compliance, and you have to kind of balance. How do you innovate? How do you keep moving forward, but still protecting the assets of the bank and people who bank with you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. There's a lot of talk in the last couple of years about AI. And I think it means a lot of different things to a lot of people. But I think what we're all talking about these days is the generative AI, the generation of content based on your prompts. But banks have really been using AI for a long time. I mean, think about credit scores, right? So algorithms that help to drive decision making based on what models are learning. What loans go bad and what loans pay back, and because of those decisions, those models have been able to learn what a good credit risk is. So that's existed in banking for a long, long time. But I think what we're seeing now is the ability to start leveraging technology in new and different ways to generate content, or to maybe take large pieces of data in financial statements and generate spreads, or generate ratios to enable the decision-making process to happen in loans. There's a lot of different use cases. And I think what's been interesting is first brainstorming about what those use cases are, and then stepping back to think about pros and cons of both sides of the coin there.
Yeah. And you're in a very heavily regulated industry.
Yes.
And, I mean, you're working with people's money and making sure that they have the finances needed. And then, with banking, it's really, really tight. So what type of protocols or guidelines do you have, especially when you have employees using AI and they might be using it on their phone? They
Yes.
could be using it in, I'm sure you have regulations about in office use on the computer, but tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. So we actually are going through a process right now to add an AI statement within our employee handbook, because we do know everybody's using it. Everybody has some version of something on their phone, and they're using it to, tell them an answer to a question. Maybe they're using it to look something up, similar to how they have used Google in the past. But one of the biggest risks that really any company has is the use of their clients' information, and making sure that that information stays within the confines of your own company. So part of what we're saying in this handbook is you will only use AI behind the bank's protected network on approved platforms in your job. We've also rolled it out very slowly in that we have about 15 employees that are still piloting Copilot
Oh,
before we do a broader audience of who might be able to leverage that particular platform. So I would say privacy security is probably first and foremost. One of the things that companies should be aware of is when you are implementing AI, there are different ways that your IT team can configure it to be more secure and to be more protective of data. If you don't, for example, configure it properly, that information that you're entering into the model could be uploaded to the internet for learning purposes, right? The model is using it to continue to learn, and if you don't, you know, check the box that you don't want your data to be used to allow the model to learn, you could inadvertently be putting information out there. So I think privacy is one of those risks. I think another risk, obviously, the wrong decision could get made.
mhm.
We always like to say that there's a human in the middle of any sort of decision or any sort of AI generated content comes out. Um, One of the other things that we've done to make sure that it's done in a safe way is these 15 individuals are all people that have been handpicked and approved because they're already expert in their job. Um, we are not using AI as a replacement for experience. In fact, I don't remember who said it, but this great quote, um, we're not intending AI to replace employees. However, um, employees that know how to use AI will soon replace those that don't, right? So if we think about it, we're going to continue to evolve and things are going to continue to change, and we need to be changing with the times. So I think making sure that the people that are leveraging the tools know what the right answer should be, or generally what the right answer should be, so that if the tool is generating an incorrect answer, someone knows it isn't just running with the decision made by technology.
Yeah, yeah, because it's very, very common for people to think that, oh, because AI told me it's right, yeah, I'll go with it. And while you're looking at that whole integration into the organization, how do you keep the human element alive and well?
That's a good question. Well, I think one of the things that you do need to be careful of, and I'm sure a lot of people have experimented with this, when you're using something like a Copilot to help you generate content, it's very easy to say, hey, Copilot, write me an article on authentic leadership. The problem with that is it's going to find somebody else's article. So then you have the risk of plagiarization. And teaching as we roll these things out, the dangers and the risks associated with each different use case are really important. Very different is putting together content. Say we're doing a blog post on financial fraud. A lot of times, what I will do is I'll just do a brain dump of everything I want to say about this scam, including a story about a victim and how it happened. And then I will use the tool to not speak on my behalf, but make it sound better. Make it sound better is one of my favorite prompts because it's not telling it go out and look for somebody else's thing. It's taking what I've got, or maybe I'm using it to better format into headers and footers and all of that. Um, but if you are using it out of the box to generate content for you, you want to spend time looking at it to make sure it really is your authentic voice. Or it can come across to whoever's reading it that that's not Laurel. Laurel doesn't talk like that. Laurel doesn't use all those adjectives.
Yeah, yeah, I know. That's so easy to do too. Well, you talked a little bit about fraud. How is there any element of AI that you see that actually increases the chances of fraud?
Absolutely. I mean, it's used for good as well as evil, right? We use it on the back end to detect patterns that maybe indicate that fraud is happening on an account. But unfortunately, the fraudsters have access to AI as well. We've seen, back in back in the earlier days, I don't know if you remember the Nigerian prince scams that we were all
Mhm.
getting,
Yeah.
all this money that needed to come into the government. And it was really easy to detect that it was a scam because there were misspellings and, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. So one of the ways that we're seeing them leverage AI is to fix the grammar issues, to create more convincing emails, to create fake invoices to make things seem legitimate. Maybe they're using AI. We have not seen the deep fake video chats or any of that kind of thing in our institution. But there have been cases where a Zoom call has resulted in wires being sent out for someone thinking that they're acting on the behalf of the CEO to send money out of the company. Um, so that has happened. We have heard situations that we believe are AI copies of voices in phone calls with bankers. Um, so that has potentially been an issue. We know that there have been some victims, some older victims, who have claimed to hear their grandchildren over the phone when in reality it was probably AI. And if you think of it, I think that you need 7 seconds of somebody's voice in order to impersonate them. So all you have to do is call those nicely worded, outgoing voicemail messages, and you've got a lot of what you need. Or people like you and myself, Mary Jean, where we're on podcasts or where our likeness has already been videoed, and you can take that content and make us do anything.
Yeah, I know. It's so scary of the what could happen. And I know that you really focus a lot on people who are elder and how easy it is to kind of put them into situations like the grandchild calling and asking
Mhm.
for money. Are you seeing other things too that is impacting that population?
Yes, I think that a good example of, I don't know that it's necessarily AI, but it becomes much easier to create fake images. So say for example, a person is a victim of a investment scam and they think that they're investing in cryptocurrency. They've bought it themselves and they believe they've transferred it to this new app by this fraudster. Um, and the app is showing them their values increasing every day when in reality there is no app. It's fake. It's sitting there making you think you're earning money on your dollars every day. When you go to withdraw the funds, they're not there anymore. um, Celebrity scams, it's wild to me to see how many of those scams are crossing lines here in our local community. Maybe they think that they're dating Brad Pitt, maybe it's Keanu Reeves. I've seen Kevin Costner used a lot in social media here locally, but because of these deep fakes, the people believe that they're actually speaking with these celebrities over Zoom or on the phone because they are being impersonated with this sort of technology. Cases where people think that they have a fiance overseas and they're opening accounts on behalf of that fiance to transfer funds because they can't make it back into the US. So I think that part of the challenge is everything that a business uses AI for. Maybe you're looking to generate an ad for Instagram and you're looking to generate a Square content. Maybe you're looking to generate an email to a customer. All of these things are used by the fraudsters in the opposite way. So they're using it to craft the email to perpetrate the scam. They're using it to craft the ad for the false employment opportunity. We are seeing not just older clients, but we're also seeing younger clients be victimized by these crimes where they think they've gotten a job or they think that they've sold their Instagram images to somebody who's interested in this as an art form. Um, and it's not until they're asked for money in a situation that they're coming to the bank where we might be privy to what's going on and hopefully try to stop them.
Yeah, I was even hearing of, some scams where there was a recent one with gold. actually, and they were telling people, oh, you need to give it to us because the government will take care of it.
Yep.
Or, take your money out of the bank so and we'll send a government agent to ensure that it's safe.
Yep.
So yeah, it's amazing how much is happening right now. So let's talk a little bit about my favorite topic, emotional intelligence. So, you're working. I know that you also are in charge of human resources and learning at American Riviera, and everything's changing so rapidly. So, how do you know when you hire the right talent? Because you're even hiring for experience. I mean, there's certain experience, but I'm thinking maybe, more entry level. How do you know you're hiring the right person for the particular job? Because now they can put together,
Yeah.
and I even heard that some of them are going into chat or going into Claude or wherever they're going into their AI app and pulling up, what are the right answers to these questions that I'm being asked by the HR group. So, what are you seeing with that?
That's an interesting question. We actually have a technical position that's posted right now. And for the first time, our HR team is convinced that AI is being used in the phone screenings, um, because it sounds like they're reading something back. And it's likely, I mean, potentially these resumes are created by AI. We've seen patterns where people are working independently for the same company saying all the same things on their resumes. Um, so I think, as with always, as HR has always required, you cannot beat meeting that person in person and framing your questions in a way that they can't necessarily prep for it by using AI to generate answers. Give me specific examples where you've done X, Y, or Z, and continuing to ask the behavioral questions that show that they actually have the experience to have done these things. It's interesting. I've been playing around a little bit. Again, I'm one of the testers, and I've been playing around a little bit with using the job description and then having Copilot generate sample interview questions for me. But it's also learning what our existing interview questions are written like. So it's not, um, do you have any experience writing papers? It's, tell me a little bit about your experience in authoring a paper that's in very technical terms to a non-technical audience. That would be an example. Um, Asking the questions about, give me an example of a situation where you were on a project and it didn't go as you planned. What did you take away from that? What have you learned? Really diving into the questions that get to the demonstrated experience that those individuals might have. And it's interesting because HR does have capabilities to use AI just like a lender does. Um, we do not use it, but within the tool that we use, our HRIS system has scoring capabilities where will score a candidate against the job posting. And first of all, I've never seen it work. Everybody seems to get a score of 51 or a score of nothing. So I'm sure with companies with lots and lots of candidates, maybe it works a little better. Um, but we don't use it. But the other thing that employers have historically done is these predictive indices, right? These answer all of these questions about your preferences and it'll tell you a personality type. And I think it's really interesting, not that we would ever hire based on a personality type, but if you're looking for someone that is wanting to sit at their computer all day long and doesn't need to be social, and they're going to be authoring work that requires meticulous attention to detail, you don't want to necessarily hire the person that's social butterfly and wants to be out of their office all the time, or they're not going to be successful in the role. So the other thing that you can do is use those types of models to generate questions that'll help you identify if it's going to detract from the person's ability to be happy in that job.
Mhm. Mhm. And where do you see the leadership? What are you looking at in terms of the leadership for the future? Because as we get more into technology, um, is leadership going to shift any, and how?
Um, I think I think leadership needs to be adapting with the times and needs to be learning what's possible with all of this because you're going to end up with a workforce that is using tools that maybe you haven't heard of and that maybe could benefit you to where you're not replacing an employee with it, but maybe you're using it in a way to make you more efficient so you don't have to continue to keep adding employees. Um, and you can continue to upskill your existing teams. I really think that another great benefit out of AI is like the example that I gave. I might do a brain dump about fraud, and it's not going to be the most easily accessible. And my brain dumps will usually be like a page long, and then I will modify it from there. But let's say I have an employee that is doing a loan write up, right? They're looking at a client, they're trying to make a case for why we should approve the loan. So think about if they don't have to necessarily have the world's greatest grammar. And we've used this for years. We've used grammar check and spell check and all the things. And, now with Copilot, Word has the ability to score it to say how professional is the document that you're writing. But think about maybe they're great with numbers, but the narrative escapes them. Maybe they're not as good at picking out mitigants to specific risks that they're seeing in there. So I think those are good ways that we can use AI to upskill or complement somebody's skill sets. And it's going to be different for every person, but historically, it was hard to find an individual that could be all the things at once. And I think that one of the great things about AI is that it's going to allow you to quote unquote hire an assistant to help anybody in your company complement what they already bring to the table. And then like I said before, the biggest risk is that it's going to be unauthentic or it's going to be wrong or it's going to return an incorrect decision. So that human in the middle is just absolutely necessary. And I think the same goes for leadership. You shouldn't be using AI to create conversations with an employee. You cannot be sitting in front of a person and having that open and active listening back and forth and responding to their responses. And I think there is a danger, especially in the remote environment that a lot of us are in. There is a danger in getting too comfortable with technology and tools, and having your employees maybe not feel like you're being as real with them. And you don't want the employee to read an email from you and to feel like AI generated it.
Yeah. And that's using your emotional intelligence and how am I going to manage this
Yeah.
relationship?
Yeah.
Because it is all about relationship, especially in banking, it's all about relationship for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. So, do you have any kind of words of wisdom you have for, possibly some other leaders that are listening in right now and when they're thinking about AI and how they're using it in their organizations? Any suggestions, thoughts, or advice?
I think the first couple of things that I would suggest would be number one, to look at your use cases. Don't just dive in and start purchasing solutions. Look at your use cases, decide what you're going to start with first, and test it. Don't roll it out without testing it. Um, there is there is truly hallucination in a lot of these models. I have tried to use it for compliance questions in the past, and it pulls from all kinds of places. Sometimes it'll give me an answer on a law that never passed, stating it as fact. So I think there's a lot of dangers in it being able to hallucinate, and you don't know where it's hallucinating from. So just be very cautious. I'll give another example. I was playing with it in preparation for a conference, and one of the things that I did was there was there was an executive order put out about debanking or de-risking certain industries like guns and ammo and politics and all of that. So banks were being asked that are SBA lenders were being asked to do a certification that shows that they're not illegally debanking industries and things like that. So in the course of that, I was playing around with it and I asked Copilot to give me information on the executive order and fair banking. And I related it specifically to, de-risking, debanking. It gave me back what sounded absolutely legitimate about fair lending and equal opportunity and prohibited bases, race, sex, national origin. That is not what this executive order was about. It had nothing to do with that. But had I not known that, I would be looking at this scenario thinking that, well, of course it sounds right. This is citing law, but it wasn't the right law. And that's a very specific example for what I do for a living. But I'm sure that you all can think about ways that the tools are going to be hallucinating. And that's why you still do need people. You need people that are evaluating the results, making sure that it is speaking in your voice, that it's making the kind of decisions that you would make. And the second thing I would just say is I like to treat AI as an assistant or an intern. You still need to spend the time and the care and the feeding, answering questions on their behalf and, helping them with roadblocks and all of that. And if you think of AI as an assistant rather than an actual employee, I think you're going to be a lot more successful because you're going to understand that there are things that it can do that are wrong, especially if you're not actively training it and giving the thumbs up and the thumbs down and telling the model what it is that you liked and didn't like. And, again, for my line of work, people aren't always interested in hearing about regulations and the new proposed rule that's coming down the pike that I want to write a comment letter about. So I like to use it as kind of a quote unquote person to interact with. What do you think about this? What are your thoughts on this part of the rule that indicates that banks will have to do this? Because most people don't want to engage with me on those types of topics at parties. It's just not a party starter unless I'm at a compliance conference. So I think those are some things that I would suggest taking away. And then lastly, make sure that if you are using any sort of your client's data or your own personal data, that you know what's happening with that data, that it's protected, and that you're being transparent with your customers about how AI may be used. And again, we're not using it with client data ourselves at all right now. We're using it for other types of avenues and, report writing and analyzing numbers and things like that. But that doesn't mean that other businesses wouldn't be, and you do need to be aware. There are also new laws coming down the pike in the state of California regarding automated decisioning, AI, and the use of consumer data. So just be prepared for it to be wrong, and then make sure you're aware of the rules and regulations behind its ethical use.
Great. Thank you so much, Laurel. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. And for those of you listening, please subscribe to our podcast and also share this with someone who might want to hear a little bit more about risk and compliance and how it's all related to the human touch. And thanks again for joining us. And thank you again, Laurel.
Thank you for having me.